have some bigger projects going on, so we just want to make sure all contractors are coordinated. So, great. Well, I thank you very much for coming out. I think just the amount of information that we've gotten from the meetings has put our minds at ease as we continue.
Driving home to New York?
I am, yeah.
2 hours?
It was 4 on the way up.
4 hours?
Right after this?
He
Yeah,
lives,
I'm on.
he lives in New York.
It was only 2. It should only be 2 to go home, but the traffic going through 95.
Unbelievable.
It's terrible.
Well, some of that might not be.
I'm also gonna.
These are just the schedules that we had completed for elementary schools.
I'm happy to be here.
All right, moving on to the PHS attendance report. I'm going to call on Dr. Bidgood to just explain and give us an update on the PHS attendance report, since we had asked for those updates.
There you go, try that first. Really want to do the talking.
How low can you drop the voice? So as you know, we had our adopt committee, which stands for attendance and drop-off prevention team, that we met monthly throughout the year. We have our next meeting next Friday, which is actually our last meeting. We've been monitoring our data at each school and the district level throughout the year. I was excited. We were trending very well early on, and then the flu season and some various other things hit us, and now at the high school, like you see for the high school, we are a little worse than we were last year. So let me frame that and unpack that for you a little bit. So the state's definition of chronic absenteeism is 10 or more days in a year. So if a student has 11 days out, they were considered chronic by the state, even though they might be a student, which we have several students that are in that 11 to 20, which are top tier students. I have another 2 students. One just got back from 2 weeks in Disney World, and one is going to Hawaii. So you have these unique opportunities for the family, and then balancing that with school year. So it's a really nuanced problem we're facing. Mrs. Cadro and I went to the regional meeting to talk with representatives from other school districts, and I can tell you that this is kind of a regional problem. It's not isolated to us, although we're working on it. With the state pretty much pulling back all supports on what we're doing, where we're focusing our efforts now is looking at things like a regional attendance review committee and things like that. We've been working very closely with a town resident, Mark Irons, who's the parent of one of our students, and his wife also is an educator in the community. And this was his specialty. He still works with the state for juvenile probation, but juvenile probation kind of has been leading the way on saying things like JRB and court avoidance and keeping kids out of the system, and attendance is definitely a big part of that. When you think about the old days with truancy, kids becoming court involved, or DCF. DCF largely will not pick up a case with a teenage and adolescent student for not coming to school. So that, unfortunately, leaves the responsibility to the school districts. So we've been having some conversations as a district and the adopt team and with representatives about how we can maybe pool resources and do some things and try and different incentives. We've been using the attendance works model, which is the most famous methodology clearinghouse for research on school attendance, using their interventions, their tiered interventions, and some of them have been very successful for us and some of them not. So I'm going to, after we meet next Friday, I'm going to prepare a report, a summary of everything we did for Mr. DePietro, which he can share for you. And one thing I'm going to do is an AROI, which is kind of an academic return on investment. So for our efforts, what are we seeing the biggest bang for the buck, or what is the biggest high leverage thing that we did that really worked this year? I can tell you just anecdotally, a lot of this is the parent education piece. A lot of it is demonstrating just how much educational trajectory you lose by missing 10 days a year, how much effect it has on a child, and that it's additive, meaning the 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, it adds up and moves their child farther behind their peers within the class. And so I think a large piece of this is the education piece in the community. We've been working on that. You'll see the various flyers up throughout the buildings. We've been incentivizing things, we've been rewarding students, celebrating attendance and things like that. There's a lot of nuance, and there's not just like one case study of what a chronically attendant student looks like. So there's, it could be school anxiety, or it could be the student that's going to Disney World for 2 weeks, and so this is the thing we need to tease out a little bit with our team and other people, and then move it up to the central office level, and then finally to you folks. And then I met with you guys at the policy committee early on, tracking. We talked about some different things, and you guys have been very supportive, and I thank you for that. So.
Can you, Dr. Bickford is one of our data specialists. Can you tell them what you saw in terms of the correlation between
Sure.
poverty and rising absenteeism?
So there's a very tight correlation, because I tracked it back. In the side note is I've done a lot of this data because we had done our NEASC initial visitation. And 10 years ago, our poverty was at about, our incident of childhood poverty was about 25%, and our attendance was much more, our chronic attendance was much lower rates of absenteeism. Over 10 years, we've gone up to now almost 54%, and you can see a very tight correlation between the rise in absenteeism and the rise in childhood poverty. And I think a lot of that, again, goes back to, we have kids with lack of transportation, we have older siblings that take care of younger siblings because the parents working 2 jobs. We have situations where parents just don't have the resources, they're moving from apartment to apartment and things like that. So there's a lot of nuanced situations where I think our guidance team, our social workers, and our kind of school security team have really worked on an individual case-by-case basis. And there's 3 tiers in that model. The tier 1 is something you do for every kid to create the warm, welcoming environment. The tier 2 is now you're setting up more specific, personalized interventions. And tier 3 is you're at risk, you're over 10 days kids. And those kids we really have a custom profile on every kid, and we can tell you pretty much every kid on that list. And I have 150 odd kids on that list over 10. Now it might be only 11 or it might be 67, but we can tell you what's going on in each scenario. So it really is a personalized intervention plan that we're trying to do for each kid. It's a problem that I think a lot of communities are wrestling with, and we're certainly doing our best and looking at the best research and brainstorming with other folks in other towns to put some things together. And I can certainly answer specific questions for you guys, but when I do that report, I'll have some really good data for you.
On the part of the state in tracking this,
Yep.
Is being late to school weighted equally as missing the entire day?
No, so the state will have, and it gets confusing because you have this chronic absenteeism, and then you have a truancy, which is 4 days in a month or 10 days in a year. Either one of those 2 will tick the box. So at the high school level, for example, you have different classes throughout the day, so you might miss that block 1. Okay, so if you account for more than 50% of that day, you're considered present by the state. At the lower grades, where you have 1 teacher all day, you come in late, you're still marked as tardy, but you're still counted as there for a portion of the day. What we did learn is some interesting things. So the state has exemptions for what they consider absences. So for example, if a student is ill or they have an injury, but they have a computer and they receive online instruction from a certified teacher, that counts as being present in school. So if we have a number of students in that circumstance, and that's something we're looking at putting together, is delivering that quality instruction online, and mitigating our numbers for chronic absenteeism.
That sounds like it would probably fall outside of the realm of that correlation with the high childhood poverty, though. Yes.
Well, we would obviously have to supply the technology to them, So it's nuance, it's not a straight thing. So we would supply, and we've done that. So for example, if a student will say, I'm having surgery or I'm ill, and you will send a Chromebook home, and teachers will post that. Okay, we'll post their assignments and they'll work with them online. We've done that for years now, and that's been effective for us. But to change that to a completely online model for some kids, and we do that for kind of recovery, because if a student is for whatever reason, misses 4 weeks of school, we don't want them to throw the towel in on the year, so we will try to bring them up to speed while they're still at home recuperating as soon as that's possible. But the days of sending a physical body out to tutor those students is cost prohibitive now. So I think by doing that online, and honestly, a lot of our students kind of respond better, especially school avoidance kids respond better to the technology piece and working at their own pace. So we had this discussion yesterday, so now is it, does a student stay home because they like working on the computer more than coming to school?
Right. They use a tardy bus in Killenly that goes a half an hour after the high school, but they started seeing the trend of students who are getting on that bus now, like they're not coming at the earlier time. So while you're trying to fix one problem, you do have to worry about creating a new one.
Because now I can sleep in for an hour,
Right.
because I know the bus is going to come anyhow.
I would have to assume that the truancy issue itself is driven by students outright not being there the entire day. You're not talking about a cumulative effect of
Correct.
students being habitually late, even if it is for economic situations at home. If a student is dropping parents off at work, using the car, vice versa, they're having to watch over. That's not what's driving this issue. I know the data's not in front of you at the moment, but.
So what's worked for us, on a smaller level is the van. Just so adolescents, as you know, like to sleep in, and unfortunately the high school has the early start time, of any school. So they'll miss the bus or whatever. So, but do I stay in bed all day now because I missed the bus? So now we're saying, the parents will call us, and they've been very appreciative. Say, hey, I don't have a car, or I can't get to where I'm at work, and my son or daughter has not, slept in, and I called, and they're up, and they're ready to come to school. And we will send, one of the security people out with a counselor or something and pick them up and transport them in that van. And now that becomes not a missed day, that becomes a present day. So I think that, if I looked at that specific subset of data, that's been tremendously helpful for us. But, there's a continuum of doing that for one. Usually it's only 1 or 2 times we have to do that for a kid, or if it's a school avoidance kid, they don't like to see the van that says Plainfield Public Schools outside their house coming, so they're going to be more motivated to get up because their parent will say, hey, I'm going to call the van, and the principal's going to come pick you up. So has
there been consideration into whatever disciplinary measures are currently being employed for students who are either habitually late or not showing up outright?
Sure. So again, a very nuanced question with a lot of different answers. So we typically will give a after-school detention for a student that has 3 parties. Okay. So what we saw when we implemented that is students would say, okay, I'm just not going to come in if I'm going to get a detention. I'll just stay home. But then I won't have to serve the thing. You know what I mean? So there's what's the correct consequence for them, and what's going to be beneficial for them. So and I think we're still trying to tease that out at our level, because there's different philosophies. There's the old school philosophy. There's someplace in the middle that is the right place for us, and I think that's very specific. But I don't think you can just say this will do it, and this will do it, and this will do it. I think it's a whole kind of wraparound, holistic services kind of thing that you have to do. What we do here, what we provide for services, and again, a lot of that is just, and you have to remember too, the slap on the hand per se comes from the state to us as a school district, but not to the student. So, the student, well, I was out 30 days, but I still passed my classes with a C. They don't.
Right. But I mean, that is the ultimate challenge of it, is because it's not a uniform
Correct.
solution to this. It is going to be on a case-by-case basis. I guess I'm curious to see if maybe trying to, and again, recognizing how many individuals there are in this entire moving piece, if a look at the disciplinary measures on the habitually tardy are resulting in those extra handful of days missed, which could very easily push us just over that threshold of truancy or being somewhat more compliant with it. But you have all the data, and I look forward to seeing what the data says.
So
Dr. Bick, may I ask, it doesn't need to be an absolute monthly report of where you stand up in front of the board, but for the June board meeting, can you get us something written that just explains again just what's been done?
Sure.
To include into our packet so we have a chance to review it?
Sure. So I'll give you an overview of the methodology we used, how we identified students as tier 1, tier 2, or 3, what those interventions look like, and then what we felt was a positive intervention for us, or one that did not have much of an implement that.
Exactly, and if there's any headway between now and the next month of ideas, it's something that we really do want to keep a close eye on, especially with, after the June meeting, we skip over July and go into August, and then we're looking at a new year, so I would expect that maybe for August, that there be another speaking report.
Correct, and then we also, now we have, so this was our first year of using the attendance work as a data tracking system. So we've actually now identified students that were tier 2 or tier 3 or possible at risk for next year. So we can have things in place as we start the school year. And this will be the first year we've ever looked at that longitudinal data all the way through. So.
Okay.
You mentioned student avoidance of school. How big a problem is that? And are many of those students being bullied and that's why they're not coming?
Have we identified why they're school bullying?
So, well, again, I don't think bullying is an issue. I think the size of the building for a lot of students is overwhelming. The social interaction, we're seeing more and more kids with anxiety, I think, than we've ever seen before, ever. And we're still kind of struggling with how to address that, with what we have for resources, for social and emotional resources. And that's why when Mrs. Cadger and I went to that regional thing, there were kind of representatives from the mental health side, from the juvenile justice side, and from the education side. So you got to hear the 3 different perspectives on it. Right? I think that for us, it's a decent-sized problem. You're coming in the transition to high school is always the most difficult. You're coming into a completely larger building with the credit system and things like that. I think generally when we get kids in the building and work with them for a fair amount of time, we do very well with them. And I think that we've had kids that we've had success with that had huge avoidance issues early on, freshman, sophomore year, that individual staff members have worked extremely hard on creating that positive adult connection with, and then they start coming to school. So, seeing school as a caring environment, knowing there's a caring adult here, knowing there's caring peers for them. But it's just the anxiety piece with children is just, I've seen in the last 10 years, is still kind of through the roof here.
Our numbers are currently running about 120, 150, right, that we're following with chronic absenteeism. And I think we can categorize that for the board to show them.
Way up. And I think, again, historically, looking at that data from K-12 of the students we have and seeing their attendance patterns and trends at an individual level has been very valuable for us.
But does it exasperate when it gets into the freshman year?
I think so, just because of the nature of high school in
That's what
general.
I'm saying.
Like the research says that the transition to high school is the most difficult one, including, believe it or not, the research says it's more difficult than going from 12th grade into college. So 9th grade is very difficult. We put a lot of resources into making sure students have a smooth transition from 8th grade into 9th grade. The freshman academy is part of that. We have a counselor dedicated to the success of just freshmen. We have a special ed case manager who works with just freshmen. So, making that kind of smaller adult team to work with that has been huge for us. So we look at it at all angles. We continue to work on it. And again, just because those students are chronically absent doesn't mean they haven't been successful here. It's just, we want students to come to school more often. We don't want any student to miss 10 days.
I know
10
that
days is only 2 days in a month. So.
according to U.S. News and World Reports, they came out with the 2019 school rankings, and although Plainfield tests above Putnam, for the first time that I've been tracking it, Putnam ranked ahead of Plainfield because their graduation rate was higher.
Correct.
And so Plainfield right now, I was just looking at it, because I had written it down, but I left it. We're at 86% graduating,
Correct.
and they're at 93.
Correct.
But we test higher. But that's in that criteria. So when I'm at one of these meetings, and it happened, like parents were taking out their phones and asking me, well, why is Plainfield ranked where we're ranked? So it's important. I mean, so I appreciate, because if we can bring up that percentage, we can bring up our ranking. I mean, and it's unfortunate. You have a good program, but you can't.
And a lot of
It's very frustrating.
The other piece is when you're looking at what they call on-track indicators. So whether a freshman, the state looks at on-track indicators, we look at on-track indicators, and that's basically that a freshman acquires the amount of credits they need to be considered a sophomore and not be mathematically behind. And I think 10 years ago when I started, that was a problem we had, which was students would miss classes or not really try their freshman year and then give up because they felt they were just behind the 8 ball because they were 5 credits behind their peers. And we've done a lot with credit recovery systems, we've done a lot with like a summer school, a guided summer school, and we've done a lot, like I talked about, with the home system to get them back on track, because a lot of that is them feeling like I can graduate high school and I can get through. You know, another issue is Putnam is a much smaller district than us. Yeah.
Apples and oranges, but,
Yeah.
I mean, they put the ranks out there and they're all, we're there.
But our students test well. Our students that come on a regular basis are, you know, successful, or in many cases extremely successful. So this is a part of getting more students into the building. And one other thing with the graduation rates is if a student, let's say a student has 24 credits and they need 3 more or 2 more or whatever, and we have graduation, the state cuts them at graduation, even though they can come to summer school and make up those credits in 1 month and be done, you know, a month later than their peers. The state counts them in a later cohort then. Yep. So it's a data game.
All right. Thank you very much. We'll look forward to the written reports and another follow-up report from August as well. Moving on to fiscal year 20 budget status report, referendum. I know that we highlighted a little bit that the referendum for the town is coming up on May 20th with that budget. Mr. Lucier, is there anything further under the old business aspect?
I don't believe so.
Okay. So then moving on to new business, Pathways contract extension.
We're just asking, the Pathways program, which has been at the high school, in our building for the high school, they've agreed to no increases in any rates whatsoever, no other conditions. The only thing they have agreed to is that they're going to expand down to 7th and 8th grade so that we can bring those in. That would potentially bring in as many as 4 to 6 students. So all I'm asking is to extend the contract for 1 year under the exact same conditions we have with the added grade levels of 7, 8, if we find appropriate students to be in the program. They deserve the 2nd year. It's been moderately successful. We've actually put more new students than just the existing students, but now that we're getting the program underway, I think we can better dovetail parents saying, I want my child in the program, and we'll know better about it. So I just need your approval to extend 1 more year at no increased cost.
Mr. Sugarman, what's our current enrollment in the program? 11? And that was out of a total of 16?
12 are embedded in the cost, 4 are $32,000 each after, but that's for an $80,000 placement, so it's a cost offset. 12 are embedded, 4 more are the allowable extensions.
All right, so we wouldn't be expanding the capacity, we're just looking to expand the grade level.
So we'll fill up to 16 now or
Correct.
something?
Well, may I?
Sure.
So by expanding down to 7th grade, what that allows us to do is you have a lot of students that are outplaced. They start to be outplaced typically around 3rd, 4th grade when students are outplaced. And you really want to capitalize on an opportunity to bring them back around middle school. Otherwise, they get, historically, the research said they're going to get stuck there. Sorry. So what we're looking to do by doing down to 7th grade, we do have the majority of our students that are outplaced are in those middle school years. We are able to start to bring those students back, because a lot of those students have been successful in an outplaced facility, and bringing them back into a Pathways type of program to make sure that they're being successful in a different type of setting, a different environment, before we start talking about further transitioning back to a further least restrictive environment. By having that expansion, we're not adding, like Mr. Peters said, we're not adding, going from 12 to 16. Everything else is the same, but it opens up the opportunity for us to transition more students back into the district through the pathway.
And the contract otherwise remains the same, we're just extending for 1 year with a option at the end of next year as well?
Absolutely.
I'll make the motion to extend the contract by 1 year.
Second.
Opening it up to 7th and 8th graders.
Is there any further discussion first? Hearing none, okay. So we have a motion on the table to extend the contract for 1 year, expanding the grade range 7 to 12, and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. fiscal year 2020 contingency plan.
So, you received a contingency plan. People are asking about this at the finance meeting. This is not actually a plan other than a contingency considerations. And the reason for this is there is a pending action of the legislature to vote in what will happen with the state budget, which affects us in terms of our ECS award. The governor proposed originally, way back as early as February, that he was going to cut money from non-alliance districts and move that money over to alliance districts. The Appropriations Committee, dominated by the same party, but didn't act until about less than 3 weeks ago. They finally came up with their statement. There's been a lot of promises along the way, but they finally came up with an Appropriations Committee that basically says they modified it and they recommend that there be less impact on ECS. The impact of the Appropriations Committee is $114,000 for Plainfield. They did include, however, originally they excluded, they wanted no part of the pension being put onto the local districts. They, however, if you read in the newspaper, they said it was an omission, and they did acknowledge that they would support up to an 88 for Plainfield, an $88,000 contribution to pension. The question put before us when we went before the Board of Finance was, what happens if the governor does not fully award the ECS? And why would a town agree to using a higher amount? And it's been hard to explain to people, but the board here, the Board of Selectmen, and the Board of Finance took the time to understand. If you start with the number that is where we are at a 15,161,000, which is our current ECS, and it doesn't happen, in essence, the taxpayers who did not bear that burden would have no new burden because the town has the right then to reduce the 15,163 by the amount up to what the governor cut. That's been in law now for the last 2 years and going forward to this year. So the reason that we have to have a contingency is because what happened to us 2 years ago, we found out in October that they were going to make a cut, and the town had to say, what will that be? Will it be 747? They decided to be 693,000. That's a question that happens between the school board, the Board of Selectmen, and the Board of Finance to determine if a cut does happen, how will it be addressed? Completely by the schools? Partially by the schools? To what extent will it be absorbed? What you have in front of you originally was a contingency plan. I want to just go through quickly to show that these things may make some sense to the public and to the board. The first thing is we know that we are installing our solar panels, and we did an actual analysis of what happens, what is the rate of production, what is the cost that we save, as you heard from these two people, and we asked them specifically to give us the number. Ron then went through and calculated we're $1 million a year electrical costs. That's what it is, approximately, even higher, $1 million. We won't save all that this year, but we don't have any cost to put in LED lights because the cost is borne by the company that installs. All we get is the rate of generation. So the rate of generation is projected between 50 and 65% on each of the schools that we're doing. We're doing 5 schools. Looking at a 50% modest production for not 12 months, but 9 months, because it has to be operational by October 1st, as you heard, we came up with a number of at least $50,000 will be saved this year. So based on, we didn't know that when we were doing this budget, that would be monies that we can save and would apply towards any reduction that we got in ECS. I put that first because that's a real number that doesn't hurt anybody. The second one is that DATCO, you awarded the contract with the agreement that DATCO would not increase. They would keep their rates the same. So there was a flat rate, and you know that they came in also to help us, and we've already done that, looked at how could we reduce 2 buses. The actual plan that they have actually takes only a 10-minute differential in the time. We can either take 5 minutes earlier from the high school or 10 minutes later for the elementary school, which might be easier for parents, so that that 10-minute difference allows more time to make the runs. If you only have a short time, you have to put 18, 20 students on the bus. They fit 50, 60. If you go from 30 students on a bus to 50, you're certainly going to use less buses. And so we have that option, and we can look at that. And we do know what our bus runs are. Our highest run for regular buses is 20 buses, and that is at the middle school, Memorial School level. Once we can make that run more efficient, we then could save. More importantly, Ron explained that because of the outplacements, we're looking at those consolidations. Each bus that we add for special ed, when we go one student at, I don't want to name the name of the place, because then you say, I know that student, and I don't want to violate anyone's rights, but there are 2 single students at 2 single places, and that's a $50,000 run for that year. Yes, we recover it from special ed excess. We do get a portion, but that's not how it's budgeted. It's budgeted, paid for, and then you get it at the end of the year. So we're now looking at consolidating those runs and even working with partner districts. So we do believe you will be able to look at a $100,000 reduction in there. Remember, I said part of it can come from a special ed run. You'll understand why I said that. Because the third one is we just opened up the 7th and 8th grade. And once we do that, that could be as many as 2 or 4 more students. We don't know today because they've got to go to PPT meeting in order to be placed there. But that could be another 100,000. There's 250,000. I went to each of the schools and asked them to look in 20,000. They can't tell me they can do that. They're already cut. They already cut from the original $500,000 they want to get to the 498,000 we asked for. But they said, we understand that if this is cut, that is what will happen. We'll do rateable reductions before we would do program reductions. Where I originally wrote you 20,000 for elementary and 30,000 for secondary, I reversed that because the secondary said we can't do that. So we put 20,000 on each school, and we'll look at that, but we put 30,000 on the district responsibility. Kerma expenses, the fact that we will not have a lot of unemployed people, so we actually put savings this year. That was part of the plan that you did for transferring. We saved money. How many people do we have unemployed currently collecting, Mr.? No. 0. So that's not a typical year. So again, by using better strategies than just putting people out of work, you can save some money in unemployment. So that's 150,000. That brings us to 400,000, and then we thought we would look at 2 things. We would consider that if the reason that we're getting the extra money than what we asked for by getting $35,980,000 is we got 100,000 more than we originally would have really fully planned for with some concessions. The town asked us to accept $100,000 of pension. We would ask if any part of that could be used if we don't get the money. If we're getting cut 600,000, do we have to put 100,000 towards pension? Maybe we could do 50. But I put that as an aggregate. That's a number that we're doing because we believe we will get the 600,000. And then the request for the fund balance is if we cut 500,000, the last time we went through this, the town was kind enough to offset about 50,000. It came in at 747. They asked us to cut 693. That gives you a contingency plan. And the reason why it's a contingency, because these are real numbers. They really can be cut. But more importantly, let's say the $600,000 is not cut by the governor. If the Appropriations Committee comes in, there's $114,000 cut that we have to plan for. And then there's an $88,000 that could be in pension. That's a total of $200,000. If you look at the first 3 numbers we did without asking anyone else to bear the burden, you've got $50,000 from solar. We have some money that we believe we can save from transportation, and some money that we can do by looking at the pathways, opening up some classrooms. And then there still is a contingency where we can ratably reduce our budgets by looking at some cost consolidations. We won't buy as much. We won't buy all the cafeteria tables that we want to replace. We would have to forego some things. I believe that what you see is in this organization, the numbers clearly show that if the Appropriations Committee comes forward, we're well prepared to make the cuts without any harm to students. If we get the full 600,000, we'd have to work with the town on this. These are considerations. What the public needs to know is before the board adopts something like this, we have to know what the cost is, and then we have to have that conversation, because there are many lines of code in this budget. There's $36 million embedded in code. These are gross numbers that give us some targets. But when it gets to the point that you're going to make that 600,000, you look at finite things. You look at the fact, maybe we won't join this. Maybe this won't happen. We would never say we're not going to have a band. That's why you saw people here. They were afraid that what the board might do is cut a program that is needed by children. And regrettably, we've already cut services over the past 3 years. So this is only the gross consideration of where numbers can be taken from. And it gives you an idea of what will happen if we find out where the state comes in. whether it comes in at a $600,000 cut or more, or only a $200,000 cut. You have two plans in front of you that it could address.
Okay, so this is not a motion tonight, it's just for your review. So at this point, I feel like we are well prepared, but again, I will reiterate what I said earlier, is that the budget has been submitted to the Board of Finance. The Board of Finance has sent it to town referendum. So at this point, we're just prepared.
Ken, I have a real quick question.
Sure.
Not specifically speaking to the possible cuts you've listed here or at the contingency plan, but from the overall town budget proposal, I just have a question about a line that I'm not sure if it's been on our side of the budget or not, but the adult education line. It was brought to my attention, I wasn't at the meeting last night, but there was a question raised about 17, 18, 105,000, 18, 19, 105,000, 19, 20, 0.
So I can explain that. It's upsetting that, you know, people only get a short time to ask a question, and then it was brought up, why is it missed? And you try to give an answer, but the fact that it's missed creates a fear or a lack of trust. So let me be, as I was last night, to be just explicit and clear. We don't know why the former finance director, no blame, it's just the former finance director built this without the 108,000. We don't know why. But Ron and I went over to work with the first selectman and the finance director, and we noticed and said, it just dropped to 0. But let's look at what really happens with that money. The money that comes from the state is approximately $105,000, $108,000 for adult ed. You cannot get that money unless you provide an amount of money. In our case, it's $98,000. And 98 plus 105, $203,000 goes over to EastCon. So with something like our technology, we get $40,000 from E-rate. It's nowhere on books, it's not on the town side, it's not on the school side. The only thing you see from us is a $40,000 lower cost for our technology because we get an offset. This number, the 108,000, comes into the district and it goes over to EastCon. We don't spend it. All we have to do is sign a document saying, yes, we want it, and the state sends it over to EastCon. Somewhere, I believe, that maybe the former finance director felt it doesn't come to us and it's an offset, so it was taken off of the rosters. If they put it on the roster, the way it should be done is you have to put it as a revenue, which means you have to put it as an expense, right? I mean, you can't have revenue without saying it's going somewhere. As soon as you raise our rate by $108,000 that we don't spend, EastCon does, you raise our MBR. So I said to the Board of Finance last night, if you want to use it as a cost offset, you can still record it somewhere. You just wouldn't want to put it on our side of the roster because we don't use it, we don't spend it. It goes directly, what we account for is the $98,000, our contribution, and the other 105 goes directly to EastCon. We don't spend it, we don't use it, and we cannot. We cannot even get the grant unless we are partnered with an agency that will use that money. So somehow it was taken off on building the grant. It just leaves a confusion to why it's 105, 105, 108, 0, and it's not there. The only explanation is it can be put there, it just should never be put there as a revenue and expenditure because all you're doing is raising an MBR. It's only an offset to our costs.
So this has previously been parked within the education budget, if I understand correctly?
We only...
In an accounting sense?
No, we've never put it in our expenditures.
There's a grant, the adult ed grant is roughly $200,000, we use round numbers.
Okay.
$105,000 is supported by the state of Connecticut, and the town, our appropriation carries the other $95,000. Effectively, that $105,000 has absolutely no bearing on the general fund. It's just like the IDA grant, the Title I grants. It's money that comes in and goes out for grant funding. It's got nothing to do with the general fund. So the fact that it was recorded historically, I don't know why, it doesn't need to be there. It has no bearing on the general fund. It's 1/2 of the adult ed program that's supported by the state of Connecticut. And it's passed through us to get to EastCon.
Mrs. Cadger, what do we taking? 1.8 million in state, federal IDEA and Title I?
Altogether, our grants are about 2.2 million.
Okay, so there's 2.2 million that's not on their roster and not on our roster.
Correct.
In this one, only because it's flow through.
It comes and goes.
It comes and goes, but it only goes by proprietary. You cannot use it for any other purpose. It's a restricted account. So it's been recorded one way and it got corrected. We just don't have that person to ask why it's not there. The only thing I want to see is the town make the error of adding to something that is a flow through and it's actually a cost offset.
So this is grant money.
That's grant money.
This is grant money.
Yep.
Yes,
And the expense, when it is expended, is booked,
we have an expense portion in our budget.
but we
And then
treat it
there's-
as a wash.
No. The wash piece is the 105,000.
Okay.
Comes in from the state, goes to East Con. We are responsible for the other 95,000. It's one particular line. It's the 1,300 account. It's the only 1,300 account you see in my budget. That is the adult ed portion that's absorbed by the operating plan of the school.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
And that's with your knowledge, and it takes this kind of, so it's very hard to explain. The benefit is only that the public would need to know that the monies do not actually, they only pass through us, but they actually adjust the cost offset.
Ron, 1,300? Yeah.
Yes, 1,300, 560.
560.
It's the 07, 1,300, 560 account.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I appreciate the question, because that's been a confusion to people.
Okay, hearing no further discussion, Mr. Worth, NEASC accreditation status.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Over the last week, last Tuesday and Wednesday, we had our NEASC collaborative conference visit. The collaborative conference is that portion of our NEASC process. Last September, we began as a faculty and a NEASC team to put together our self-study. We built the self-study, sent that in. The collaborative conference is the first step where a team of 3 individuals from the commission come, they take a look at our self-study, and they then spend the 2 days here in the school interviewing students, teachers, community members, central office personnel, to determine that the validity or to support our self-study, to gain evidence to make sure that we have an accurate self-study, and then they after that they'll put together a report. Their report is based off of their findings, our self-study, what we determined to be our strengths and our weaknesses. They developed a list of recommendations and accommodations for the school, and then what we do is we use that information to build our strategic plan. And it's a school improvement plan that we will then address some of our, continue to work on our commendations and then address our recommendations, those recommendations that we find as a self-study team, and then the recommendations that are supported, and then other recommendations that may be found by this visiting committee. In 18 months down the road, we then have our decennial accreditation from the NEASC and the Commission on Secondary Public Schools, and that's a little bit larger process, more individuals involved, a little longer process. And what they're going to do is take a look at our self-study, our improvement plan, and our process over the next 18 months of the components that we've identified as needing to be developed and worked on. And they're going to tell us, or take a look and see how well we have made progress towards obtaining those items. The strategic plan is an ongoing plan. We then go through the 5-year process of where we provide the 5-year report, and then another 10 years down the road, we go through the process all over again. And what it's going to do is it's going to help us determine our accreditation, how well we're working here as a school, and there's some areas that we're going to need to address in the future. We received a few recommendations, or actually we received a number of commendations. Preliminary, when they finished up in the afternoon, they met with Mr. Bickwood, myself, Mrs. Riley, and the 2 co-chairs of the NEASC team. And some of the accommodations were the fact that the students felt safe in the building. They felt that the teachers and the faculty and the adults in the building truly cared for them and wanted to see them have great education. And so that was a huge improvement over 10 years ago, and some of the things that we've seen over the last 5 years. So that was awesome. They were impressed with the mindfulness room that we had developed and that opportunity for our students, because we are dealing with a lot more social emotional issues with students, and that we are addressing those. One of the recommendations on the same respect was the fact that we could use a little bit more support as far as the social worker or the social emotional support for students, and so that's something that we will be looking at. Recommendations of producing or providing additional collaborative time or some collaborative time, more collaborative time for our faculty during the school day was one of the things that they were looking at, as well as our vision of the graduate. We have had a committee of teachers and administrators working on that, the revised graduation requirements, some of the new requirements from the state, and how we then look at our programs and trying to keep up with state requirements, as well as designing graduation requirements and programs that are more student specific, so that it may be students that want to go on into like the humanities or a STEM focus or a healthcare focus. So we're working on that, and they were impressed with that, and we have to continue to develop that. But in a nutshell, this visit helps us design our strategic plan that we will then work on over the next 18 months. We have the next visit, which is, again, a little bit larger visit, larger team, a little more in depth. And then from there, we will receive accreditation. Again, they'll give us some recommendations, and so we keep on going and we stay accredited. Any questions?
No, I thank you very much. I was on the NEASC accreditation many years ago when I was still teaching in Massachusetts. It was a lot of work then. It's my understanding it's grown significantly in those years.
The process is a little different, but it's actually a little bit more involved, but it's a little more user-friendly, I think is a good way to put it. So it's working out for us.
Great. Thank you very much. All right, and finally, superintendent's report. Mr.
It's
DePietro.
a long night, so I have very quick 2 comments. One is, if you just look at this is just to give you the evidence of a notice that went home about Shepherd Hills and Moosup and about the grade reconfiguration. That's why you have a copy of that, because people have asked. First thing let me tell you is that I gave you in your packet that I actually am teaching a class, which I'm having an exciting time to do. I have seniors at the high school, I have about 11 of them, and they are taking the Para-Pro test, so that upon graduation, when they get their diploma, they'll also have a certification to be a Para-Pro for the rest of their life, fully certified. So I think it's something that we've been talking about. The high school has been saying we want to find different avenues, CNA, health occupations, Para-Pro, different things that people easily can translate into a professional opportunity to be making funds. Making wages as they continue their education. The 11 that showed up is a good range. Only 1 male, remaining are female. We'll keep working on that as we go on, going forward, but right now it was good to see. 3 of them said to me, well, I was going to be working towards this anyways, but if I can take it with you and then actually take the test for free, that sounds great for me. And she's going on to a 2-year program, and then considering she wants to possibly be an educator. So she said, if I take this course, when I graduate, for the 4 years I'm in college, I could be offsetting my college expenses, working 20 hours a week, 4 hours a day, making close to $300 or more, $15,000 a year, helping my parents offset the cost of books and other things. And I said, that's why we're doing this. So I think it's a great thing that we also may pull a few in. We may get a few who stay in Plainfield if they're going to the community college and work for us and help us, because we want to get them. 2 people, 1 within the district and 1 from outside the district, have taken the Para-Pro with us that are not students. And so we're actually opening the doors to people who are looking for an opportunity to move from where they are, either because things are changing, they closed another business in the town, they need jobs. And so we said, why don't you come and join us? Some of our people are allowed to be a paraeducator for supervisory, but not in a classroom unless they get the certification. So the first class that we just had was on looking at the test as a sample of 18 questions instead of 90. They went through it. We talked about why they got their answers and why it's pretty close to what students should know and be able to do. The next session will be on the actual content, what's in the reading, what's in the writing, and what's in the mathematics. And then the third one is looking at, in the 90 questions, 5 to 7 questions are about what the para would do in a math classroom. Like the students are writing about dinosaurs, that was one of the things. And the teacher asked you to draw out questions about what else they might want to study. What following question might lead students? And you have to pick what you think a para might do to engage a student. So it's a lot about content, but somewhat about the practice. That's a Monday for the next 3 weeks, and then on the Wednesday, the 22nd of May, they'll take the test, and we'll know before they graduate if they are certified. They'll have a diploma and a certification to work. And anywhere in the state for the rest of their life. Anywhere in the nation if they want it.
Will they get recognized at graduation?
I don't know about that yet. Let's see what the results are. But I'm assuming that we should get a good 78%. These children that came, these young men and women, they seem very bright. They took one of the math questions and said, I skipped that one. And I said, well, you're allowed to miss some of these questions, but you should guess. So they were honest about how they were getting their answers. And one of the pieces we're talking is about the strategy of test taking. What I did want to do is just give you a reminder. There's been a lot of Facebook conversation about the reorganization of grade levels. So I just wanted to let you know I'm living up to the promise I've made to the board and that I've made to the public. I believe I'm a very honest and trustworthy person, but you'll see this letter went out on May 1st. It went to all the parents in Shepherd Hill and Moosup. I clearly told them what this project is all about. I put a block saying it's a study team to consider all students attending SHE, and then in pre-K and K in grade 1, and then attending MES. I explained to them what would happen if it was designed as an early learning center, so I gave them some information. And then clearly I said, representatives from families of both SHE and MES will be invited to participate on a study team through November, because you would need to know this by December, in order to study the benefits and or challenges of this model, in order to report to the Board of Education in December 2019. The study team can engage 6 to 10 parents and 6 to 10 educators. A much larger team would be difficult to schedule. We plan to meet twice a month in the early evenings. Everybody knows what the responsibility is. We hope to participate monthly in PTO meetings to share our study and ask for parent ideas or concern. In this way, all families can share their thoughts with the study team. If you are interested in being a study team member, you're welcome to send a note to your school. We have many interested parents. We will attempt to select them randomly so that we represent all grades. No changes have been planned for the coming school year. It's like, this is going to happen in August. And then I gave them a sign up. I've already received more than 24 interest of people on the part of faculty. This went out even before. I got a lot of feedback from faculty. I'm sure maybe the ones who wanted to write did that. But I've heard, we went to a meeting on the budget at Moosup School. I presented it then and there. People came up and said, oh, sounds interesting. So everybody gets to go to the same one school, everybody gets to go to the next one. So we heard some nice things. We heard some things from the teachers also. I know that Mr. Carty was going to meet, I believe, with some faculty at Moosup. And I think that's the way we do it. We keep the information going. I do plan a meeting this summer, but I do plan to make September or October and November very strong meetings with PTOs so that you really get a voice and you get to hear it. I think people are concerned, and only when they see that you're absolutely going to be honest and above board and transparent, they will say, maybe it won't happen. But everybody's afraid there's one more change and how it will affect their children. I moved in an area, I thought I'd be at one school, and I tried to assure them, if you're in Moosup, 2nd and 3rd grade, you'd be at Moosup if this were passed, it may not. If you're in Shepherd Hill, you're still going to have Shepherd Hill in your plan, but everybody would have the opportunity. Some people asked and said, what about the teachers? All grade 1 would be there. So the same grade 1 teachers that were in kindergarten, the grade 1 teachers that were in Shepherd Hill and when Moosup will still be there. If they really hope their child was going to have a Moosup teacher, that teacher's going to be there because every teacher from the district will be in grade 1 at Shepherd Hill. If they're really hopeful that their Shepherd Hill teacher in grade 3 they could have, they'll still be there in the other building. So if it's a choice of teacher, I think they'll see that. I don't want to gain your confidence, I just want to gain your trust that we're being straightforward and letting parents know that they can't participate. And even if they can't participate, we will go to them at the PTOs. We'll be at your meetings in September, October, and November. Please make sure to join us so that there'll be a representative from the team, and particularly the ones from their school, representing to their school. That's who they'll trust. We're Shepherd Hill parents on this committee. What do they want to say to us about the thinking? So those are the two projects that at the end of the year are pretty exciting.
All right, I just want to go back to standing committees, individual reports real quick. Just a reminder, June 10th, Honor Cord Class Night, 6 p.m. That's where we give out, the students receive a massive amount of scholarships and their honor cords. June 11th will be the BOE meeting, which is not on this end of the year, so you just might want to pencil it in. June 12th, graduation, 6 p.m., but again, plan on arriving early. Obviously, we'll meet on the 11th. Yes, and there is a guest speaker from the board. Well, myself and Mr. Redant will be speaking at graduation. Again, June 13th, PCS grade 8 promotion ceremony at 5 p.m. So the next month is very busy, and that's in addition to the town meetings that are upcoming. One about the MBR, 2 about the budget referendum. With that, Cheryl and Kathleen, would you mind seeing me right after the meeting? So that we do have some union dates for a negotiation that's up and coming for our secretaries and our para educators. With that, I'm looking for a motion to adjourn. Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? We're adjourned.